On this episode of On the Microphone, I welcome Nick Wiget, the announcer for the Cincinnati Bengals and the MLS team FC Cincinnati. Nick, welcome to On the Microphone. Thank you for being here. Introduce yourself to everyone who may not know who you are and what you do, please.
Sure thing, JT. Nick Wiget. I'm from Southwest Ohio, Wilmington, Ohio, to be exact. The reason I'm on the show with you today is because I'm a public address announcer and I do other forms of production work. If you're around Southwest Ohio, you may have heard me or at least seen something that I've done, maybe a button that I pushed in a stadium or arena. I'm a PA announcer, one of two PA announcers technically for the Cincinnati Bengals, PA announcer for FC Cincinnati. I do PA work for the University of Cincinnati, University of Dayton, Ohio State University, Xavier University. Just picked up Miami University this year. I also work in Columbus for the Columbus Clippers baseball team, AAA team for the Cleveland Guardians. Work for the Columbus Blue Jackets when they're in season as well. I kind of jump from one sport to the next and it becomes sort of a nomad around the entire Southwest Ohio region. I've done a little bit of work down your way for University of Kentucky. I've done some work in Pittsburgh for the Pirates. This whole show could probably be my resume if I kept going, so I'll probably stop. I worked for 6 years for the Dayton Dragons, and I also worked for the Harlem Globetrotters for 3 years, and I think that's about it.
Man, when I cross the bridge from Kentucky to Ohio, I expect next time to not only see, welcome to Ohio, Governor XYZ. I expect to see home of Nick Widget
I'll
on
probably
there.
just be hanging there by the bridge, so I'll just wave when you come by.
Man, what a resume. Unbelievable. And uh, so let's just jump right into it because you're really your resume is fascinating and outstanding. But I want to get the big question out of the way.
Okay.
The top story of the past, I don't know how many years, but definitely of this past year was the incident involving Damar Hamlin.
Mhm.
Explain what is going on in your area of the stadium as this unfortunate incident is occurring.
Okay, the hard-hitting question right from the go. Okay, I as I've talked about this with other folks over the last several months since the incident happened, it's one of those things where people go, "Well, what were you guys doing?" And I think we were a lot like everybody else. We were doing a whole lot of nothing, to be quite honest, at least initially after everything happened. Uh, you're in a situation like that that's so unprecedented and so scary and so uncertain. Yeah, I kept saying to everybody in the room, I was like, well, we don't want to do anything and speculate on what's happening right now because we honestly don't know what's going on right now. We can kind of see what we can from our booth, which is kind of on the, I guess, probably third level there of the stadium, kind of in the corner, the northwest corner of the stadium, and we can look down the field and obviously see there's a lot of help down there and a lot of people doing their respective jobs and things like that. But I think all of us, the producers and myself included, there was a couple times where someone would say something like, "Well, maybe you should say something to the effect of there's going to be a postponement or whatever of the game." And we kept reiterating, no, don't say anything just yet until we hear some sort of official word, because the worst thing we could possibly do is make some sort of mistaken speculation as to what's about to happen, and then something totally different happen, right? Then everyone kind of second guesses everything and gets on social media. There was a there was a comment on social media that someone said that at some point that they were going to resume football activities in like 5 minutes. We never heard anything like that from the NFL or from any of the broadcast teams or anything. Um, we had the broadcast on in the room, obviously, so we're listening to those guys kind of try to fill the time and not try to speculate as well. But we were all just kind of in the darkest of what was happening. And then once we knew the game was going to be postponed, um, which took a long time, as you well know. I mean, probably an hour and a half there where we just kind of sat around and waited. We The NFL put together an official statement, had me read the statement, And I will say that it went from one of the scariest scenes to one of like the nicest scenes in that there was no booing, nobody was upset about the game not continuing. I think everyone's real concern was Damar Hamlin and his health. And as I left the stadium that night, I think a lot of people were very emotional. You could tell it. Bills fans, Bengals fans, kind of putting their arms around each other and talking, and it turned out to be a very very nice scene, especially now that we know that Damar's going to be okay. Um, I'm already I've said this several times. I'm already looking forward to the Bills coming back because assuredly we're going to have some sort of little segment where we kind of pay a little tribute to Damar or introduce Damar to the crowd, and probably have some of those first responders and healthcare workers there. And man, the response you get from something like that is super cool. So that's the long answer to a very short question. Um, we for a long time we didn't do anything. I think we were all just kind of like the deer in the headlights, like what's going on here, you know?
Yeah, because it had never happened before. What are you supposed to do? You are in such a tough situation with that, and I love your point about look at the goodness of humanity that came out of this. I think that's the positive, not only the health of Hamlin, but that's the positive come out of this is, look at the positivity from humanity of coming together and caring for their fellow human being.
Yeah, I tell you, as I left the stadium that night and I stopped on the way home to get a little something to eat because 'cause it's been a long day. I mean, I got very emotional about what I saw, and it was still so uncertain about Damar, but just watching the folks react the way they did. Because I think if a player gets injured, we prepare for that sort of stuff, and, we're used to seeing that in football and hockey and other contact sports, and some of those injuries are pretty bad, right? I mean, you see guys like Ryan Shazier, it's like he may never walk again. But it's different even yet when you think this person may not live.
Hmm.
And I think that realization really hit a lot of people walking out of the stadium that night. And I mean, people were emotional, but people were also like kind of huddled around. They were praying. They were, sending best wishes. They were asking what they could do. And yeah, you saw the goodness of humanity. Um, in a roller coaster of emotions too. I guess I should add that as well. I think a lot of fans felt that. I know we felt that as far as in the control room. The hype building up for that game, the opening segment, the presentation, we were on an emotional high like never before. Everyone was so amped for it, and then to have like all the air let out of the balloon instantly. That was another thing that after the fact the NFL and the team reached out to everyone working there that night and said, "Hey, we understand that you've kind of been through a traumatic situation, obviously too, and if you want to talk about it, we have counseling. We have you can talk to us or whatever." And so that was nice too. And like I said, the fact that the stories turned out so with a happy ending, so good. Now I'm actually looking forward to the continuation of the story here in the fall.
Yeah, it's time to finish the story. Let's have the
Yeah,
actual game. Yeah, that place will be electric that
that's
night.
right.
Enjoy. So obviously, you work with the NFL. Give us an idea on this. Kickoff time is set for 1 p.m. What time do you get to the stadium then?
Okay, if it's a 1 o'clock game, I'm there typically about quarter after 7 in the morning. So we're there really early. Our production team and our group of guys that organize everything want to make sure everything's going to go well. Basically, we have a series of meetings that start at 7:30 in the morning where we go through the scripts line by line for several different groups of people. I attend all those, and that's a good thing too because I think no matter how many sets of eyes look at all the different scripts and everything, there's still some mistakes in there and things like that that we can catch hopefully before I say it over a microphone. And little things too, just dates and times and stuff like that, and pronunciations and all that sort of stuff. But we get there so early. I joke around. I was telling someone the other day. I said we get there the same time as the Bengals. So every time I pull into the parking lot, it's like me and a few other dudes and all the cheerleaders pull into our same parking spots in the central riverfront garage where we pull through so we know that at the end of the game we can pull right out into the line of traffic and leave. So we have like optimal parking. But to get that optimal parking, you have to be there before the sun comes up on a one
Yeah.
o'clock day, right? So there's a trade off, and you go, I'm going to be hanging out for hours waiting on this to happen. But it's fun. Everyone's there having a good time, kind of getting ready and everything, and the time passes very quickly. But yeah, it's the earliest call times I think I have are for NFL Sundays.
I knew it was early. I did not realize it would be 7:25 in the in the morning
Hey, I
early.
get up, man. I pull through a restaurant, drive through if they're open yet, and get breakfast. There are sometimes I go, "Hey, they're not open yet," and it's Sunday morning. Why would they be? They will. I don't know. They're open till 7. Oh, great. And then make my way down to the stadium and walk in the dark.
So speaking of stadiums, uh, obviously you are working in some big stadiums, but I know you've also done some small arenas. So what's your preference? Do you like that big crowd? Do you like small arenas that are packed out, or gymnasiums, like your high school gyms? What is your preference then if you could choose?
I think you probably just hit on it there with if you have a big stadium and it's full and the environment is right, then that's a lot of fun. If you have a big stadium and there's nobody there, that makes for a very cavernous feel sometimes. And that awkwardness of, I think I can hear myself better than everybody else, right? But on the other hand, to your point about having a smaller arena, and I still wouldn't call this smaller, but like University of Cincinnati's Fifth Third Arena, there holds, I think, 13,500 people. Those 13,000 people feel like they're right on top of you. So instead of being in a 65,000 person stadium or even 25,000 plus at like FC Cincinnati, that 13,000 and change can really feel like a bigger crowd a lot of times when they're right on top of you. I will say when I traveled with the Globetrotters about a decade ago, we played every place from the biggest arenas in the country to high school gymnasiums. And some of the most fun we had were in those like small high school gyms in the middle of Iowa where there was going to be a couple hundred people, but that's about all that they held too, right? And so there were people almost literally sitting at the scorer's table with us because that's where the seats were. So that there's something to be said for that too, where it's like when you feel the people on top of you and you feel that kind of intimate setting, that can be really nice, and I really enjoy that too. I'm the type of person that I think I'd kind of have fun no matter where I'm at, what I'm doing. And it sounds cliche to say this too, but over the years I've said it. I can announce to 10 people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people, and I kind of do the same thing every time, just because I feel like that's what the crowd expects. Granted, I might tone it down a little bit if there's only a couple hundred people, but I'll give it the same energy and everything to make it feel like it's the finals of some sort of big championship or something. So all those things can be a lot of fun.
Right, because there's still people paying their money to come into the gym, into the arena, whether that's a expensive, 50-yard line ticket, or that's the grandparent that wants to see their grandkid, dribble a basketball for 1 minute.
Mm. Oh yeah, and I think about it like this. What if it's the first time that any of these folks have ever been to that sort of an event? You want to leave them with a good impression, and hopefully they want to come back and experience it again. I always think about that when it comes to even like rivalries in sports. That there's a little kid somewhere that's rooting for that other team, and he likes the other team or she likes the other team. So what can I do to kind of make them feel like they're a part of it too?
Hmm. So in your resume, you mentioned basically the entire state of Ohio. So
I
you
think I
mentioned
forgot the
Dayton.
Reds. I worked for the Reds for a decade too. I forgot them. Who are on like a hot streak right now.
Yeah, in first place as we're recording this.
Yeah.
So Ohio State, Cincinnati, uh, University of Miami, Ohio, the Bengals. You're in some big time organizations and big time events. How do you handle the pressure that comes with working for these big organizations and schools?
It's weird. I think having done so much stuff over the last 20, 25 years, I don't feel a whole lot of pressure necessarily or like feel like there's scrutiny for what I do. And part of that reason is that I think there's comfort in knowing that everywhere I go, there's other people there that I already I already know, or have worked with other places. Um, I think there's a lot of folks like me that work multiple jobs for multiple teams, and are lucky to do so. And part of that reasoning is that you work at one organization with this person, and they're like, "Hey, by the way, in the fall we do hockey across the street. Do you have any interest in doing that? You want to come over and work there?" And then you show up there, and like someone said to me one time, "Hey, you've got like a great attitude about stuff, and you seem to care, and you showed up on time. So like now, do you want to learn how to do this?" Or now, what else do you do? They'll ask that type of question. What else do you do? And one thing has led to another, to where I've been fortunate enough to have so many different opportunities at so many places. But a lot of that's just because of those connections that you make, right? That networking sort of thing. Um, it's weird about the pressure. I always tell the story of getting the job with the Globetrotters when it comes to pressure. I got hired in the middle of a season back in 2012, and I'd already been doing a lot of work around the area for several teams when I got that job. And excuse me, and I was used to doing things on the fly and stuff like that to a point. Although I always say preparation is the key to success, right? But when I got the job with the Globetrotters, we showed up at the University of Florida's basketball arena and go inside. It's my first day on the job, and I start to look around and I go, "Hey," I said, "Who am I working with today?" And one of the MCs there goes, "What do you mean, who you're working with me?" And I go, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, who's the other announcer?" He goes, "Well, there is no other announcer. You're the announcer." And I go, "I'm the announcer tonight?" He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "This is a scripted show, right?" "Yeah." And I go, "Yeah, I don't have a script." I said, "A producer called and hired me," but he goes, "Well, weren't you at training camp?" And I go, "What's training camp?" And that's when everyone was like, "Whoa, okay." They're like, "Hey, doors are in 15 minutes." And I go, "Cool." So they go, "We're gonna run out and we'll get a copy of the script and we'll set it down in front of you. And we're gonna put the audio computer in front of you. You're in charge of that too, by the way. And we'll just kind of cue you up and have you go through the show." And I go, "Okay." So I didn't have time to get really nervous about it. I was like, "Well, I've been to a Globetrotter game before. I see kind of how it works. I know what they're going to do sometimes. Just follow along with everything." And when we got done, one of the guys looks over and goes, "That was pretty good." Because "You get to do it again tomorrow. Just keep it going every night now." And I said something to the effect of, we got back on the bus to go back to the hotel, and I said, "Man, I don't know how you guys do that." And he goes, "What do you mean, you guys?" He goes, "You are one of us now."
Nice.
And it hit me, and I was like, "Yep." So every night, man, you're just gonna go do this, and you're gonna learn it on the fly because we got some smaller arenas for the in the middle of the week, but by Saturday we're playing Miami's American Airlines Arena. Like we're the afternoon game, and then the Miami Heat's playing that night. I go, right. I was like, all right, cool. And I just kind of just did it. And so now when it comes to sitting down and looking out and going, man, there's like 70,000 people or whatever out there, I go, they're probably not really paying much attention to what I'm doing anyway. Not really. And if I do screw something up, then people kind of laugh it off or whatever. But yeah, it's not really pressure. It's more like excitement and just I always like being a part of things. I mean, I like going to games anyway, and to be a small part of it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I don't. There are times. It's going to sound terrible too. There are some times when it's so peaceful, and as you well know, and there's a little bit of a hush in the crowd, and you go like, "This is really nice, like nap conditions." Like I'm so. Oh wait a minute, I have to say something. You kind of, "Oh, wait a minute,
Mm.
I'm on the mic, okay." Which is kinda this weird kind of calm comes over you or something, and, I've never fallen asleep, but I get to the point where I'm like, "I'm very calm right now." Very, very calm.
Well, you touched on my next question, which was you mentioned, well, if I make a mistake, there's probably not paying attention, or you hope that they're not paying attention. I'm all about that growth mindset. You learn through mistakes. So tell us about a mistake you have made while announcing, and what did you learn from that mistake?
It's weird, I can't I think sometimes I don't take it with me, like, if I make a little mistake or something like that, and I don't agonize over it or anything like that, and I'm sure I've made pl even last night doing FC Cincinnati, I stumbled across a couple words, and then when I got done, I'm like, I don't know what I was trying to say there." Okay, well, someone probably heard that, that's all good. The funniest mistake in a weird way is that because I've had so many jobs with so many different teams, everyone's always concerned that I'm going to say the wrong team name, right? You're going to forget where you are, and at some point, you're going to say the wrong name. I've become very cognizant of that because you don't want to go into something and I don't want to go to FC Cincinnati and call them the Bengals or the Bearcats or whatever, right? But I was working a game a few years ago as an on-camera host in lieu of they already had a PA announcer for University of Dayton women's basketball, and they said, "Nick, can you do on-camera hosting?" Sure, I'll try that. So that morning before the basketball game, we had sat around and had lunch with, or that afternoon, I guess, with several of my former crew members from the Dayton Dragons. And if you can see where this is going, I was back in Dragons mindset, man. This is all the guys I worked with. So I get out on the court. We're getting ready to do a big thing for the Dayton Flyers. And I go, all right, we're going to have this contest to win a Dayton Dragons prize pack. And the producer's in my ear, and he just goes, Flyers. And at first I'm like, what's he talking about? Because I didn't even realize I'd said it right.
Mm.
And I go, all right, who wants this Dayton Dragons prize pack? And I said it with such conviction the second time that two other guys came on. They go, Flyers in my ear. I had the earpiece. And the whole time, I even after I realized it, I even called it Flyers or Dragons again the third time. And everyone joked after I got done with that little game or whatever. They're like, "Well, the Dragons aren't really promoting themselves here, but you wouldn't know it today. And hopefully that guy's not disappointed in his Flyers prize pack." And I said, "I hope not either." You know, I said, in my defense, I said, I just hung out with all those guys, man. I said I worked with them for 6 years, and I hadn't seen them for a few years, and it was like nice to catch up. And they were all running cameras and stuff there for the Flyers game that day. So yeah, that's one mistake that I kind of laugh off. Um, I think occasionally throughout my years, and this is not so much now that I'm working in like major league sports because we're more meticulous about checking and double checking and everything. But when I worked I worked minor league soccer for almost 10 years for a team called the Cincinnati Kings too. I forgot about them actually. The team that I owe a lot of to for even getting me into soccer. Long story short, the rosters would be wrong sometimes in USL and lower level soccer. They'd switch players out on you and you wouldn't know it. You know, there's the whole organization. Some of these organizations have like three or four people total working in the front office, right? So they don't really have time to update things. And I would just get what I could from a coach or from the web or whatever to try to like piece it together. And then you'd have someone yell, "That's not the right player's name." And I'm like, know who any of these players are. I'm sorry, man. I don't know every player on the Long Island Rough Riders or whatever. Like, yeah, I got the roster, but it was wrong.
Mhm.
So so according to mine, I got it right. But
That's
sorry about
right. That's
yeah.
what you were given. I'm with you all. I support you all the way on that. That's what
Thank
you
you.
were given. So,
Yeah,
yeah, what
this
are
is
you
my
supposed to
story, and I'm
do?
sticking to it. Right? It's like this is who I said it was. So I said it with conviction. It must be him.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I There was one time I was working at a school I hadn't worked at before. They had changed their mascot name. Like the previous years, they were stallions because this is horse country, and they
Yeah.
switched it to Broncos.
How
And
would you know?
yeah, is the year they it was like it was a preseason football game, so this is like the first time. So I didn't know you switched to Broncos.
And now you're just going to be called the horses.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, how would you look at
Uh,
that and even be able to tell, like, even like a logo or something, right? It looks
oh
buff
yeah.
or whatever. You're like, oh, okay. Well, that's new information. Thanks. From now on, I'll call them Broncos. But yeah, I joke around now, and this is the honest truth. And this is not a knock on anyone in communications, by the way, at any of my teams. Sometimes I get starting lineup still on Twitter. Like the fans will have it before I get it, which is ironic because I'm the one that has to say it. Then I go like, "Hey, I don't have lineups yet. I better check that other team's Twitter or Instagram, see if they posted it yet." Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. And then if it's wrong, I go, social media got it wrong, man. Like,
There you
they thought
go.
about it, but
So out of all these places that you've announced, are there is there a group of fans that has had the loudest crowd chant? And my assumption is that it's a soccer crowd, but what do you recall as like, wow, this is loud, and they're not just cheering, they're chanting something. What was
well,
that?
I think that the call and response stuff that I get at the Bengals for like "Who Dey," obviously it's loud, but as far as sustained cheering, chanting, you're right. You can't get past soccer, and then I joke call them the soccer hooligans. That's a badge of honor, though I think to be called that. But like the people in the Bailey at FC Cincinnati, I mean they're going all night long. It's as loud as can be. The Bailey alone is 3,000 plus fans. They're dancing, they're beating on drums, they're chanting, they're singing, and it never stops. It's so unlike any other scene in any other sport because, you think like a baseball game, people come there to relax and they sit back and they have their hot dog and their beer or whatever, and they're relatively quiet until something happens. Football, yeah, we get charged up for the big plays and stuff, but meanwhile, there's also a lot of talking to your friends and just enjoying whatever. But soccer, I mean, it's 90 plus minutes of nonstop. They're losing their voice, they're doing their thing. And I mean, they helped me do my job, to be honest. Like it's call and response for our starting lineups there. So when I say like in goal from Naperville, Illinois, number 18, Roman, the crowd goes Celentano.
Nice.
I've had several friends say to me, like, really, you got it easy at FC Cincinnati. You only do half the work. And I go, that's kind of true. And I said, during the game, I don't say very much, right? I mean, they play, and I'll do a card maybe, or a substitution, or a goal. I said, the only reason I get any money to work there is because of the pregame and the halftime. I said, then I read like a book, basically.
Mm.
But yeah, even during lineups, man, like the people there in the stands, they have your back, and they'll chant everything, and they'll mispronounce the names that I started to mispronounce. So that works out great.
I love soccer crowds. Absolutely love them. I mean that's the atmosphere that if you're paying for a ticket just for the atmosphere, like you
Yeah.
go to a restaurant for atmosphere, the soccer crowds are the way to go.
Yeah, and like I said, it's so unique. I think up until maybe 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have felt the same way maybe in the US as like in Europe or other countries or whatever, where soccer is obviously still a bigger deal than it is here in the United States. But boy, have things really come around when it comes to like Major League Soccer and interest in the national teams. Which man, I've had the great fortune of announcing for the U.S. men's national team 4 or 5 times now that come through Cincinnati, and that's awesome every single time they come through. And I always think to myself, I got my announcing start doing college soccer. I was a radio DJ, and before that, I was a mobile disc jockey, and I always had an interest in that sort of stuff. But to do PA announcing was in soccer, and I think, man, to go from like a small Division III soccer crowd of maybe 20 people in a little rickety stand behind me to some of the most famous athletes in the world in front of us playing the beautiful game. This is this is kind of crazy, right? Like I always treated it like it was a World Cup event, and now I'm part of a World Cup qualifier. Or this year we've got Gold Cup, and we've got a Leagues Cup competition coming up where we're going to see international teams. And yeah, it's kind of wild, and the fans are like I said, they're rabid. They never stop, and that makes it more fun, I think.
Well, I like your point about, hey, you started out with 20 people and you did it right with 20 people in the crowd. Now you're doing it right with 70,000 in the crowd.
Yeah. I really haven't changed very much. I'm still kind of doing the same shtick, like, and some of the folks I went to college with were like, "Well, you're really into this," and I go, "Well, yeah, you should be, right?" So now, let's say last night, we had a home FC Cincinnati match, and I saw on social media where some of the former players from my small college soccer team were there with their families, and they're probably saying things like, "Hey, Nick's the announcer. It's our buddy. He announced your dad. When I played soccer in college, he was my announcer, and now here we are, and he's the announcer for the MLS team." It's just kind of crazy how it all came together.
Your work ethic doesn't change, but something that has changed. Stadiums change. And
Mm,
before there was Great American Ballpark, there was Riverfront Stadium. Do you miss Riverfront?
yeah, sure. That was like as a kid, I think all my generation aspired to play baseball on AstroTurf. Like we were, you know, that's what I wanted, man. Like when I saw a field of turf, I'm like, that's legit. Um, and I wanted the little cutouts around the bases and the base paths to still be turf, right? Because that's the way it was there. And I have a lot of fond memories of Riverfront Stadium. By the time I was probably at least 7 or 8 years old, my dad, who was an auto mechanic, had his own shop, worked closely with a local parts store, and they had season tickets to the Reds. So dad would go over and pick up his parts to work on cars, and they're like, "Hey, you want our tickets at the ball game tonight?" And this happened more than not, by the way. So like, I feel like we used their tickets all the time. And, so we'd go to Reds games literally all the time, and it was almost like having season tickets. Um, I was just telling a story last night at FC Cincinnati, to a guy who's just a little bit too young to really remember Riverfront that well. I said, "Man, I'm really dying for a frosty malt." And the gentleman next to me, who's worked for the Reds for like 30 years, he's our audio guy at FC Cincinnati as well, and he goes, "Ooh, frosty malt." And the other younger, fellow was like, "What's a frosty malt?" And I go, "You've never had one? Like the frozen chocolate frosty malt you get at Riverfront Stadium?" And then the Great American Ballpark had them for years too. I said, "You can't really find them anymore." I said, "But here was the trick. When you'd go in as a kid," I said, "I'd go, the first inning would come and the frosty malt guy would come around and sell frosty malts. And I would have to make the decision, do I want one now or do I want to wait till later to buy one? Well, if I bought one now, the frosty malt guy would be back 40 times during the game. If I didn't buy one, we never saw the frosty malt guy ever again. And so you'd better get one while he's here, and then you get another one later. But like, if you think I'm going to wait till like later in the game, you're out of luck. Yeah, you're never going to see that guy again. So that was kind of my concern or priority, I guess, during most of my youth there at Riverfront Stadium was to make sure I had frosty malts.
My favorite memory at Riverfront, I was sitting in the outfield when Deion Sanders played. And it was
Yeah,
pretty got to be pretty close to Neon Dion, and that was a time like he was huge. I mean, he's
yeah.
prime time. So that
Oh
was
yeah.
really cool.
I could say I was there in was it 90 when the Reds had the back-to-back-to-back home runs that everyone talks about. It was like Sabo, Larkin, I think, and Davis hit back-to-back-to-back home runs. Kind of a famous moment during that season, which everyone claims to have been there, just like everyone claims to have been to Tom Browning's perfect game. And then most people probably were not because there was like a 3 hour rain delay. Then he came back out, right? I can also say I was there for Pete Rose Jr.'s first game, only game. Well, he played that many at all. I think he played only the one game. But I was there when he played and started for the Reds. And then we went the time when they were hyping the two Boone brothers and two Larkin brothers in the infield. So it was the first time that two pairs of brothers had ever played in Major League Baseball in the same game. All these sound like gimmick things, but I was also there too. Like, I mean, we started going in maybe 1986, 87. And so by 1990, I was full fledged going all the time. And I've still got ticket stubs from 91 that say world champion Cincinnati Reds. And so growing up, I always said to folks that I liked baseball more because I felt like the Reds went and won the World Series while the Bengals and other teams, yeah, they went to the Super Bowl, but like they didn't win or whatever. Um, but I say that, and I haven't even really mentioned the fact that I guess I'm from Wilmington, Ohio. Training camp for the Bengals was in my hometown at Wilmington College. So working for the Bengals is a full circle thing for me as well because I grew up with those guys here every single summer. And as a kid, I'd go over to our local YMCA, which was built onto the campus there in Wilmington, and hang out with all the players. And just as a kid, it was great. Like there were all these gigantic dudes everywhere that would go to the swimming pool with us and throw us around. I remember my mom saying one time, she goes, I couldn't find you and you were in the swimming pool and there was like all these monstrous guys like tossing you way up in the air. And then I remember vividly coming outside and a bunch of kids huddling around Jim Breach, and he taught us all like how to appropriately kick a football. Like here's where you want to hit it if you want to get the angle and stuff. Got pictures with him and Anthony Munoz and Boomer and all those guys. So
Yeah,
so yeah.
I have this picture now of Boomer Esiason throwing you to Anthony Munoz in the
Oh
pool.
yeah. Oh yeah. And I didn't care who any of them were. I was just like, these guys are great. I'm like 5 years old hanging out uh, and then as we got older, we ended up working the training camps some. My friends and I did up and through high school. They were here up till I guess my probably my junior year of high school when they left Wilmington and went to Georgetown. But yeah, that's like a full circle thing too. That like we were heavily involved in Cincinnati sports because constantly went to Reds games at Riverfront, constantly had the Bengals here every single summer, have all the T-shirts and everything that say the Summer Jungle Wilmington and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's sort of fitting now that I work in and around all these different teams.
You've worked for all these teams and you've worked so many different sports. If there was, say, right now, someone called you and said, I want you to announce XYZ, what would be the one thing you say, I might have to pass on that? That I've never done that before. What's something that, you'd be a little hesitant on?
Oh man, I don't know because I've announced things I really didn't know what I was doing when they called. I didn't tell them that. I mean, when they called, and said, "Can you do swimming and diving?" I'm like, "Yep," and I'm thinking, never done that, but I can watch like Olympic trials and listen in the background and see what they do, or gymnastics or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything. Lacrosse was a little like that. I mean, I'd been around guys that played lacrosse in high school, so I kind of already kind of knew it. So I'd be lying if I said that I didn't know what it was. Um, I didn't know a lot of the rules, but that didn't stop me because I'm thinking to myself, I don't need to know the rules if I'm just doing public address. Probably they're not gonna. No one's gonna question my call on that, right? Um, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that I wouldn't try. Um, I'm a I I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, as you know, because, I was down in Lexington last week attending wrestling. Um, I love the spectacle of so many different things that I can kind of find joy in doing anything and everything. I've announced one NASCAR race. There's something that was
Mm,
different for me. I did the Kentucky Speedway back in 2019. I did the Quaker State 400. Uh,
Sparta.
yeah, yeah, and I had the whole weekend of races, and that came about. And I've never been a big race fan in some ways. I've had friends and even an ex girlfriend whose family was like really into racing, and so when the opportunity came, a gentleman that worked with me at the Reds was like, "Hey," and he'd been a broadcaster for years in racing. He goes, "Hey," he says, "Do you want to go down to Sparta with me over the weekend in July and do all the races?" And I'm like, "Yep." Like that sounds awesome, man. Like it's a big crowd of people. It's a big party atmosphere. I said, "I just seems like a lot of fun, man. There's just constant stimulation, something happening everywhere." I said, "But I'm gonna need your coaching to be quite honest." And he was so cool. He went and got like uh it was like a notebook basically just filled with notes about everything. And he says, "Okay, study up on this, and that way you'll have an idea of what it is you're calling." He goes, you're familiar with like the drivers and stuff." And I go, "Yeah, for the most part, I know who they are." I said, "There's probably some new guys that I wouldn't know." And he goes, "Well, that's everybody, right? Like they're rookies or whatever." So like he really helped me out a lot. And it was great. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course they closed that or they moved the races from Sparta to other tracks. I'd go back and do that again. I enjoyed that quite a bit. So I don't know if there's anything that I don't know. I mean, I haven't done bowling yet or anything like that or cornhole, but I'm willing to try.
Now, one thing I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. You've announced the flying pig
Oh yeah.
races, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, there's one that's okay. When I got asked to do that, the ladies approached me from Game Day Communications, Betsy Ross, Jackie Rowe here in Cincinnati. They said, "Hey," I was doing indoor soccer at the time for another iteration of the Cincinnati Kings. They said, "Hey, do you have any interest in doing a marathon, the Flying Pig Marathon?" And I was like, "How do you announce a marathon?" And they go, "Well, you basically will just stand at the finish line and hype some of the sponsors, and then when people come across, announce the winners, things like that, and then announce the names of people who finish and congratulate them on running the race." And I go, "Oh, okay." And the only drawback was, "Oh, by the way, the race starts at 6:30 in the morning." Ooh, okay. Uh, but but yeah, and I did that for like a year or so, and this was 2011. Then they were like, "Hey, can you host the opening ceremonies as well? You did a really good job with that. Can we have you come up and do that?" And so I ended up doing that, and now I do all of the races all weekend long. Talk about being stretched from like one end to the other. some of these races are over the weekend are shorter. They're like 5Ks and 10Ks and stuff that are a part of the Flying Pig Marathon weekend. Um, I can't finish the start line announcements fast enough to make it to the finish line to do the finish line announcements. Like the runners beat me there for obvious reasons, and so now I try to work all those when I can. This year I did all those races, and then in the middle of it, I did an FC Cincinnati match the night before the Flying Pig. So I don't remember the Flying Pig this year. I'm sure
The-
it was great. Everyone had a great race. I'm sure I was very happy and had a big smile on my face, but I was so tired, I'm sure that I just like it just kind of went by. But that's fun. That's like a big party too every single year, and the folks there are great. And I see a lot of familiar faces every year, friends and otherwise people I've met that I've become friends with since in the race world and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun too.
Yep. Back in my running days, I ran the Flying Pig half marathon and I loved it. I mean, Cincinnati is a challenging course. You got some elevation to it, but you also have the downhill. But just the environment is so good. You were probably the announcer when uh, I was there in my corral because you come out and the fires going up off
Oh yeah.
the intro. It's
Oh
really
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it is that they try to make it so that the 13 or the 26 miles goes by faster in a lot of ways. There's always something kind of happening alongside the course, and the course itself is beautiful. Like you said, very challenging at times because of the nature of the hills in Cincinnati. Some folks say it's more challenging than even more famous races like the New York and the Boston because they're just flatter by nature.
Yep.
But it's been a lot of fun to watch it grow too over the years. I mean, even since just I started doing it, I feel like it's grown exponentially and just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. And every year rolls around and like I'll have a baseball schedule come out and it's like I can't work that weekend because I've got Flying Pig Marathon and everyone's been very cool about that. They're like, we get it. Like you're the guy that's done that now for the better part of over a decade. So cool.
Have
Then I come
you,
back and I'm so tired after that. I feel like I've run the race.
well, have you ran any of the races? That was going to be my next
No,
question.
no, no, I don't look like it now. I was a cross country runner in high school, which was many years ago. Um, I've said a couple times, like, I think it'd be cool to be a part of one of the shorter races just to get the experience of doing it. But man, I mean, between, being 44 years old, I have a 3-year-old son, and the pandemic, none of those things were very beneficial to me as far as, um, running or staying in shape. I don't know, running after a 3-year-old kinda keeps you in decent shape.
That will wear you down for sure.
Yeah.
La Last question. You mentioned you're just like me, you're a huge wrestling fan.
Mhm.
Now we talk about Mount Rushmore, the top 4,
Oh,
but
boy.
I'm gonna change it a little bit. What who is on your Mount Rushmore for wrestlers just on microphone skills?
Okay, that's still a very tough one. Um, I don't think you can look past somebody as talented as The Rock was, Dwayne Johnson, especially now that he is a mega star in Hollywood and has been now for some time. Um, it takes a good actor in order to pull those sort of things off. Um, when it comes to just sticking to wrestling, well, he doesn't really just stick to wrestling. Chris Jericho, there's number 2 right there, right? I mean, he's a rock and roll star as well with his band Fozzy, and then he's in like a Kiss tribute band or something now, and so he's got those mic skills whether he's singing or whether he's talking. Okay, from there, from those 2 down, I don't know, you go way back. I think when it comes to pioneering mic skills and really developing character, Nick Bockwinkel of the AWA. He was the type of guy, and I say that because of his style. If you've ever watched any of his promos back from the 70s and 80s, he, unlike Hulk Hogan, who's very good on the microphone as well, and the Ultimate Warrior and all those guys that would yell and shake or whatever. Nick Bockwinkel just spoke to you. He just talked in a regular voice and still would talk about how intimidating he's going to be and what he's going to do to you in the ring. And it was very believable. In that same vein, and I don't know whether I'd even place him above or at the same level as Bockwinkel, would be Jake the Snake Roberts, and it's for the same reasons. Jake would cut a promo and never raise his voice, and you'd still be scared to death of what he said. You know, he just had that look. He was good looking into the camera and speaking and being very direct about everything. He didn't need to yell at you to get that point across, right? You just it was a believability sort of thing. And there's so many guys and girls these days, ladies these days in wrestling. I feel bad because I haven't included any of the women in wrestling that are great on the stick. Um, I don't know. Can I have a little bonus round for that? Like,
Yeah, go
I
for it.
don't know. Let's see, women who are very good speaking. Becky Lynch is very good these days, obviously. Um, Charlotte Flair has certainly developed. I'd put Charlotte above her dad, even when it comes to mic skills. I mean, when it comes to character overall in wrestling, I don't think there's ever been anybody better than Ric Flair in general. I mean, straight across the board. He is the quintessential wrestler. I could go on about this all day. To pick four though, yeah, let's go with Jericho, Rock, Bockwinkel, and Jake Roberts. And I've been fortunate enough. I met a couple of them. I met Jericho and I met Jake. And yeah, so like I don't know, there's so and these days too, it's like the tradition has kind of continued where you have to be good. You can't just be a good athlete. You can't just have the look. You have to be able to talk. Like currently, guys like LA Knight.
Yes.
You know, like in Lexington, he came out and I said, "This is how you know when a bad guy is over." He did nothing to endear himself to the crowd. He walks straight in the ring, shoves Rey Mysterio straight on the ground, a Hall of Famer, and the crowd cheers him. He's over, man. There it is, right? Like, or last Monday night, him cutting the promo and the whole crowd in Cleveland going crazy. It's like he's supposed to be a bad guy, right? So was Steve Austin. These
Hmm.
guys are supposed to be bad guys, but they're just not. So yeah, I could go on about that forever. I'll stop it for the sake of time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can talk wrestling all day.
Yeah,
Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time
thank
to
you.
for being on the microphone show. As always, we let the guests close us out, so we're going to end with whatever you want to end on. This is your time.
Oh boy, I could talk again forever. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm always appreciative of the community of public address announcers on Facebook. Have a lot of good interactions with the folks on there, and it's always nice to run into other folks that do what we do. If nothing else, we could tell funny stories about things that have happened or whatever, and I always enjoy that. So, like I said, thank you for letting me be a part of that community as well. And I look forward to seeing people, man. I mean, come out to a game. Uh, I say in Cincinnati, but like sometimes I'm in Columbus and Dayton as well. Sometimes I sneak down your way and do like spot gigs at UK and stuff too. So if you're ever in the area, this goes for you and everybody else. Please do hit me up and say hi. We could chat up a little bit, maybe grab a bite to eat. Like I said, I always enjoy meeting other folks in my crazy line of business. What we do, we're very unique, I think, in a lot of ways. People ask, "What do you do for a living?" I go, "I read up to a microphone." But I've done it for a long time, and I really enjoy it. And like I said, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Nick. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share the content. Also, consider joining the Public Address Announcer Facebook group so you can connect with others who are on the microphone.